Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name's Kevin. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm going to be your host for today, and I'm joined by David, software engineer here at Oxide, as well as Luke, who's the founder and CEO at Helix, to discuss private AI use cases and how both Oxide and Helix fit into that story. I want to start out by saying that this is probably the first time that you're hearing about AI from Oxide, and there's a good reason for that. There's been a lot of hype in the market around AI, and it's easy to lose real value in all of that noise. This isn't a stream about Oxide's changing to become an AI company, far from it. We do want to shine a light on the real world use cases and advantages to running open source AI models privately on your own Oxide computer today, especially when it comes to how to get up and running easily with our friends over at Helix. David, what can you tell us about why someone would want to run these open models and how that's different from other options that we've heard of, like ChatGPT?
Yeah, so everyone has at this point probably interacted with LLMs in some way, probably through ChatGPT or Claude, and it's easy to see potential, but there's a lot of open questions for companies that actually want to get some value out of these systems. Writing song lyrics is cool, but people want to know how they can build useful applications around these models. And on top of that, how can you do that while preserving privacy without sending out a bunch of information that you usually would not be sending out to third parties, or you may even be legally prohibited from doing that. And then how can I run those models without setting up a bunch of new infrastructure? How can I use the infrastructure I already have? So today we're going to talk about kind of the two-part answer to that. One is open models, like Kevin said, like Llama from Meta, that you can run on your own machine or on infrastructure you own and VMs, like the Oxide Rack. And that answers the privacy side because those models are on systems you control. But even once you get those models running, you now have to figure out how to build something on top of that. How do you make that useful? How does it slot in with the rest of your software? So that's where Helix comes in. So we have Luke here to talk about Helix's platform for building with LLMs. So let's hear about it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you both. And yeah, it's great to be here today. So what we're doing with Helix is we're taking the best of open source AI and packaging it in a way that companies want to consume. And I can tell you a bit of the story of kind of how we got here, if that's interesting. So I'm a startup guy. I've done this is startup number 3 for me. I met Brian, I think, when I was doing startup number 1 years and years ago, when we were doing storage for Docker. And so I was running around San Francisco trying to convince the Solomon Hykes, the CTO of Docker, to add an extension mechanism to Docker so that we could plug in our storage pieces that we were building. Yeah, so like I've come from a background of doing DevOps, and then the second company, we ended up building an end-to-end MLOps platform, kind of pre-Gen AI, so before before ChatGPT, before like AI was quite so hypey. And then I did consulting for a few years, and I saw this really interesting thing happen in the market where Mistral 7B came out late last year, or mid to late last year. And suddenly it was possible to have like a model that was almost as good as ChatGPT that you could run locally. And the other interesting thing that happened at the same time was that it became possible to fine-tune those models also on consumer hardware. And so I said to my friend and co-founder Kai at the time, like, it's time to have another go, because this is a really interesting development. The fact that businesses can now take these large language models that are now, like, deep learning has got good enough that the machines have mastered language, right? Which is kind of exciting. It used to be science fiction that you could have a proper conversation with your computer. But now, but it became possible for businesses to take those models, run them locally, and then customize them to specific use cases. So yeah, we went out into the market with this local Gen AI stack in December, and we instantly heard back from lots of companies saying, yes, we do care about wanting to run LLMs locally, either for data privacy, security reasons, or regulatory reasons, like all telcos in Europe are prohibited from using cloud providers for certain use cases because they're owned by US companies, for example. And there's a bunch of other use cases like this around the world that we're finding where people care about running models locally. And so when I came to San Francisco recently and met up with Brian again, the really interesting part of that conversation was that there's an interesting fit between Oxide, which is all about having a private cloud that you can own, own your own computer, basically, and this notion of running LLMs locally in order to enable these Gen AI use cases. So that's just a bit of context.
Right. I mean, I think I'm pretty squarely in your target audience, really, because I have messed with LLMs precisely in Oxide VMs and kind of wondered, okay, how do I go from here? I can chat with the model, but how do I turn this into something bigger?
Absolutely. And there's a bunch of use cases you want to be able to enable, like document ingestion and API calling. So if it's okay with you, I'll start the demo because the demo involves a bit of waiting. So we can keep chatting about things while we wait.
Sure.
So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can see that. And
yep.
I will put that away there. And I'm actually going to go in and delete a machine I set up earlier and clean up the disk just very quickly. So while I do that, do you want to say a few words about what we're looking at maybe from an Oxide perspective?
Sure, yeah. So this is the Oxide Web Console. I'm a product engineer, so I don't actually primarily work on AI-related stuff. I actually primarily work on this web console and other user-facing parts of the product. So what we're looking at is the front door of the Oxide rack. This is where you go to create your VMs, create disks, upload images to use to boot from, manage networking. That's for the developer end user. And then this is also, you probably don't have access to this in your view, but this is also where the operator can come to operate the rack. So they can see things at a higher level. They can see the different silos of users, which is what we call the different you might imagine departments in a company, things that need to be kept completely separate. They can manage networking. They can allocate resources to different groups of people. So this is the UI for that. So right now, it looks like what you're doing is you're setting up an instance with a public IP address so that you can hit that from the public internet.
And if I can remember what domain I attached it to, then I can show you that, yes, we have this public IP. I've also set up the VPCs so that we've got default firewall access for HTTP and HTTPS, which is fairly standard kind of stuff that you do in any cloud platform. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a new instance. So this instance, I'm going to call it Helix 2. And I actually got given special permission to whack the number of CPUs in here right up to the max, which is 64. So I'm going to make a honking great VM here. And I'm going to put Debian on it. And I'm going to put 256 gigs of disk in there. I'm going to give myself SSH access. And for a networking perspective, I'm going to say I'm not going to take an ephemeral IP because I'm just going to go ahead and attach my public floating IP address. And then I'm going to hit create instance. And yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, while we wait for this, I really enjoy using the Oxide web console. It's a really nice.
So if you click connect right there, you can see it boot up in real time. So click the little connect button right there. We can just watch the serial console for fun.
Yay! Linux is happening.
Fun feature, yeah.
Nice.
It makes it easier to tell when it's ready to go because it lands on the login prompt.
Awesome. Cool. So if we go back to the instance and I grab that IP address, I think I can remember it's called Debian at the IP. And it's probably going to, oh no, there we go. It worked. Okay, so this is completely fresh Debian install with nothing done to it yet. So let's see how quickly we can set up a private Gen AI stack running entirely on CPU for now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install Ollama. for people who are not familiar with Olama, it's a really nice project that gives you access to lots of the best open source language models. And they made it and it's basically just like an LLM server. So it will run an OpenAI compatible API. Okay, so Olama is up and running. I'm just going to refer to my my instructions that I made for myself so I don't mess it up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull down Llama 3 Instruct. Whenever I do this, I go, oh, I wish I had such a fast network in my house. Because you must have 10 gig, I guess, in the rack where this demo stack is set up. So that's pulling down a 5 gig LLM, which is called Llama 3 Instruct. And it'll just take a few seconds and then that will be up and running. But at the moment, that's kind of, it's fairly, I can show you that it's there. You can say Olama run Llama 3 Instruct, and you can say, oh, and in another window, I'm going to pull up. Let me just grab this. Oops, I didn't mean to click on it. I meant to click the copy button. Debian at. I'm going to install btop. Oh, btop isn't in Debian. I thought it was. It is. I just had to do an update. I just like running btop because it's pretty and I can see like all the cores getting warm while you do things. So you can say, hello, model, and it will talk back to you. So that's kind of interesting, but it's not that useful on its own to just have a model. What's more interesting is if you can spin up the infrastructure that you need around it to get business value out of it. So we're going to do that by running Helix alongside Olama. And so the other thing we're going to do is we're going to specify API host to this oxide.clusterworld address that we verified is working earlier. And it's going to say Olama detected. It's going to go ahead and proceed. It's going to install the CLI. It's going to make sure Docker Compose is installed and Docker. This is just like a simple deployment, just using Docker. It also works on Kubernetes, so you can deploy it on top of a Kubernetes cluster. And I think Oxide supports Kubernetes, doesn't it? I don't actually know anything about that.
Yes, in the sense of, you can run Kubernetes on a VM, but we don't have a native integration yet.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. So yeah, you could spin up a bunch of VMs and then deploy Helix on top of a Kubernetes cluster running on the VMs. Okay, so it's reminding us that we have to create an A record pointing at our IP address. I'm just going to check that that worked, and it did. Then we're going to go into this directory that it's set up for us. I'll make this a bit bigger. And what have we got in this directory? We've got a Docker Compose file, and we've got an env file. And if we look at the env file, we can see that it's pointing to the local Olama instance for inference. So then we can do what it tells us to do, which is run Docker Compose up. And I have to be root for that. And that's then going to pull down the Docker images that are involved in running Helix. While that's running, I'll show you. So Helix is this GenAI stack. It's got this kind of sequence of layers, this interface layer, which allows you to define like a UI, embed applications in websites, interact with SDKs, APIs. You can even plug voice integrations into it. And that interface layer talks to Helix apps. And these are like GPTs from ChatGPT, but they run entirely locally on your own infrastructure, and you can version control them because they're version controlled YAML. Because we come from a DevOps background, we think that's the correct way to version control business critical applications. And then you can either connect this to external LLMs, which we are technically doing here because we're connecting it to Olama, or you can run Helix on top of GPUs that run locally. And then you can ingest private data into Helix, and you can set up API integrations and so on. And if you go and look in our docs, then there's a bit more of a technical sort of architecture diagram here that shows you the different pieces. These are the containers that have spun up on the control plane node. And then you can attach these inference providers from multiple nodes. So you can scale out across multiple nodes, multiple VMs, and so on. So that's up and running now. And of course, the last thing we need to remember to do is this thing it told us to do here, which is to restart Caddy. And then we should see, I'm just going to check the logs. And we should see that Caddy is up and running. It looks like it successfully provisioned a TLS certificate. And then we can go to oxide.cluster.world. And if we cross our fingers, then we will see that the Helix stack is up and running on there. So that's working. Helix out of the box spins up a Keycloak instance for users and authentication. And by default, that Keycloak instance is open to new registrations so that you can set yourself up with an admin password or an admin login. And then there's instructions in the docs on how to lock that down. And then if we go in here, oh, look, we can see that we've got that Llama 3 instruct that we downloaded with Ollama that's available to talk to. And so we can say, hey, Llama 3, how's it going? And that's going to have a little think. We can see the cores warming up. And Llama 3 is responsive and saying, it's great to hear from you. So that's fine. Like this is kind of like a ChatGPT-like interface that you can run on your own infrastructure. But what's more interesting is when you start looking at building out these apps that have different capabilities. So let's go in and create a new app. And let's make an app for Oxide. So we're going to go to, Oxide Computer. I'm going to take the website. I'm going to make an app called Oxide. Tell me about Oxide Computer. And you are a helpful assistant who likes selling rack scale computers to potential customers. And then we can customize it a little bit. I'm going to hit save. So I'm going to grab that image for the background and put it there. And then I'm going to go and grab an Oxide Computer logo from here. That one might work. Copy image address. And I can just paste that in here. Oops. Paste it in here to the avatar. There we go. That works. And then I'm also going to say shared and global, which means that I'm happy for anyone in the world to come and access this app now that it's up and running on this URL. So now that that app is there, well, let's just try talking to it. Say, hey, I want to buy a computer. And it's immediately saying, oh, I want to help you find the perfect computer for your needs. But it doesn't know anything about Oxide Computer yet. So let's fix that. What we can do is we can go and take the website and we can paste it as a knowledge source inside Helix. And so you can say oxide.computer. It's a web source. We can scrape to a maximum depth of 1 and just scrape 5 pages. And you can also set it up to scrape every hour or every day so that shortly after the website gets updated, then this chat interface will have the new knowledge. And what you can see is happening in the background is that it did that scrape and then it quickly indexed all of the chunks that it downloaded and converted into Markdown. So what we can do here is we can search the knowledge base. This is a technique called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, where these chunks come out like this. and so you can see there's lots of information about that's been scraped from the Oxide website, visible here. And then we can go and say, hey, I want to buy a computer. And if we pray to the demo gods, what we'll see is that it's going to do something a little bit more interesting than it did before, which is that it's going to know something about Oxide. And it does. So it's now going to basically sell me on the idea of buying Oxide. So that's kind of interesting. If we hit launch, you can see that now inside the Helix interface, we've got this app store inside here, and we've built this Oxide app that knows about Oxide. And we can go in here. I could share that link with you, and you could register for an account and then go and interact with it. So the next thing I want to do is quickly show you, well, actually, just quickly, let's check that from that app, we can go into Oxide, we can launch it here, and we can say, tell me about Oxide computer. And you can see we've got this kind of branded application now inside the system that's able to go and retrieve knowledge and include that in the responses. So there's one more thing I want to demo, which is that we can also integrate Helix with APIs. And so what I'm going to do there, you see it started selling me on Oxide. So what you can see there is if you go into your apps, I'm going to make a new app. And I know this is a slightly contentious example, but I'm going to make a Bitcoin app that knows about the current price of Bitcoin. And I'm going to say, not because I like Bitcoin or anything, but just because we have an example API integration with an API that can tell you the current price of Bitcoin. And the fact that this is interesting because it's live data that you have to go and query from an external system. So we can say, this is the Bitcoin API tool, and you can hit save here. And then you can say, what is the current price of Bitcoin? And then what that's going to do in the background is it's going to go and make an API. It's going to do three things. The first one is that it's going to classify the user's question. So the very first thing it does is to classify whether this question requires the use of one of the tools that we have. And you can see it's thinking. So it says tool use Bitcoin. It's currently running the action. So it's determined that it needs to use the Bitcoin tool, and it's now running the action of using that tool. And what that does is it constructs the request body for the API call based on the Open API spec or the Swagger spec that was provided for that API. It's then going to make the API call on behalf of the user, and it's then going to summarize the response of that API back to the user. When it's finished doing that, oh yeah, you see it's finished. It's actually managed to go and get the price of Bitcoin, and it's 61,807. So let's go and check. I mean, it's a bit off, but I guess the data source is a bit wonky. But that did actually go and make a live API call and retrieve that data from that API. So that's really the demo. And what I had hoped to do was actually integrate with the Oxide API itself. So maybe we can do that for a follow-up, or if people are interested, we could show that. But the Oxide interface itself has a REST API, and so it would be possible to go in and actually enhance the Oxide tool or make another Oxide app that is able to make API calls on behalf of the user. And then you could put a natural language interface on top of doing things like listing your VMs or asking how much disk space you have left in your silo and things like that. So yeah, that's the demo.
That's really cool. A lot of cool different things you showed there. I mean, there's the site RAG. There's using the OpenAPI spec. Like you said, we have an OpenAPI spec for our API, which you could, I guess, ingest and figure out. The only problem is it probably has a couple hundred endpoints in it. So that might get, interesting choosing which one to use. One other thing I wanted to mention is, it was really fast starting from scratch. I mean, I was surprised. I kind of was expecting you to start with a prepared VM. So it was really fast just installing Ollama, downloading the models, setting up Helix. But once you've done that, you can snapshot that disk and make an image from it. And then the next time you create an instance, you can just boot straight from there and everything's already installed.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, those copy on write snapshots that we presumably have under the hood, because OpenZFS, yay, is that would be a great use of putting the model weights on there so that they could get used over and over again.
Right. You don't have to wait for that very quick download.
And if somebody's got a use case for this, they've got a business case, they're interested in deploying this in their organization, you can check out the link that's in the chat, or you can scan the QR code that's on the screen to sign up for a real Oxide silo, where you can prove out that use case using the same real Oxide cloud computer that Luke was just demoing on. And if you're interested in this, but you don't have a specific use case or a need for an Oxide computer to run your AI today, Luke, how can they get in touch with you and be part of your community?
So if you go to helix.ml and go to our website, the best way to come and chat with us is to join our Discord community. So I'll just share my screen again super fast to show you how to access that. If you just go to helix.ml and then scroll down to the bottom here, then somewhere around here, there's a Discord button. So hit us up on Discord or send us an email. There's email links here to email Chris. It'd be great to meet people and explore what people thought of it. I think there's a huge potential for running LLMs locally. We just keep hearing that from all over the globe, that there's big, serious institutions all over the world who have the regulatory requirements or data privacy requirements to want to run everything locally, but at the same time they feel the tension to be competitive. And Gen AI truly will change the way that the business is done. So for a company that's in that position of needing to be competitive with Gen AI, but having those stricter data security requirements, like maybe you can't send customer data outside of your country or something like that, then Oxide plus Helix would be a great choice.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us today, Luke, David, everybody on stream. Have a great rest of your day. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.
Awesome.